Just a quick one, actually. I'm stitching in this, and I'll give you a viewing of what we're looking at. This is a partition. It's double-sided, two pieces of leather with a reinforcement in between, and it's stitched along the top. And what it does is it divides a bag, or in this case, a mini trunk, into two parts. And this is the bit that gets stitched in between two gussets either end, and the gussets limit how far the trunk can open. This is what a gusset looks like. So this is the exterior view. This gets stitched, this gets glued in and pinned into the inside of the trunk. So it lines the inside of the trunk as well as creating the gusset. Most of these types of builds commercially by many of the top famous brands actually have a two-piece. So the gusset is separate from the internal lining. I've decided to create a mono gusset. So it's kind of the inside lining and the gusset in one. So that is what we're looking at. This is the part where the partition goes in, stitched across the top, and we have holes here, which is where the pins go in. This is really what limits the gusset from fully coming away. So as you open the trunk, it comes under stress every single time. So you want to pin that in, because of course we can't stitch into wood, and you don't want to rely just on glue. Tiago says, good afternoon from Portugal. Good afternoon. Notifications well and truly on. How you doing? It's well and truly the evening here in the UK. So you tell me what I'm going to do. Where is my round awl? Use this one. So the stiffener on the inside of this that gives the structure to this partition is making it a little bit difficult to put the needles in. That's better. There we go. Makes it a little bit easier just to stitch up. Although it is ruining the angles as I'm stitching. It's interesting. I haven't quite seen that before. So just rearrange the threads and then not carry on doing that, I guess. I'm good, thank you. We don't really have a word for evening in Portuguese, so I always forget about it. All right. So it is the evening in Portugal. It is 7 minutes past 7 here. So yeah, effectively this goes between the gusset. It kind of moves open with the trunk as it opens, and creates a divide. So essentially two compartments within the trunk. Otherwise, when you open it out, everything is all in kind of one large compartment, and this helps to compartmentalize that. Plus, if it's too open, sometimes things can fall in sideways, and then you can't close the trunk, because of course the trunk is solid. So if your keys have gone sideways, it's going to make it difficult. We're on the same time zone. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Just a little bit down south. Oh, interesting. So yeah, so this is where the gusset is going into. This is the opening here. So this gusset will be a little narrower once it's kind of stitched in, but essentially it kind of goes on the inside, but I'm showing you on the outside, kind of like that. So that's what it's for. Right now, I've just glued in the lining for the bottom. So this piece, that's actually the first piece to go in. And once that's in, we can put the gussets in and everything else goes along. Cool. So carrying on here. And this thread that I'm using is some vintage thread. It is, what is it? Is it Barbers? Yeah, vintage Barbers. I think this is older than I am. It's written in, oh, no, okay, so it's German and French all on the side. I don't exactly know what something, is it 1830? No. Can't actually see what size it is. Let's have a measure. Yeah, 0.4. So quite thin. But this is from the days when linen thread was kind of, what's the word, cultivated by hand. So the staples were much longer on these. The staple being each piece of fiber. Whereas these days they're machine cultivated and the fibers are a little bit shorter, meaning modern linen thread isn't quite as strong as it used to be. But obviously a lot less labor intensive these days. But I find vintage linen thread to be more consistent, in fact. So the interior on this is beige. And the reason I've gone for beige is it kind of reminds me of vintage trunks. Many trunks actually have interiors made of canvas. And over the years, let's put this down a little bit. Sorry, guys, making you a bit sick there. Over the years, it kind of darkens and gets a deeper, richer color. And it goes from being off-white to a kind of beige or a darker beige color. And I kind of wanted to replicate that, but in leather. And in this case, I'm using goat skin. And I've gone for a beige, which gives that kind of vintage feel to it. But instead of being canvas, obviously it's leather, which is a little bit more premium, obviously. If you wanted to do this on a much bigger trunk, obviously a goat skin probably wouldn't be large enough. You need at least a calf hide or a side of calf. Sometimes when stitching in with heavy reinforcements in the center, very stiff, it can alter the angle of your stitching very slightly. A machine doesn't really care about the linen length, strength, or the looks. A human's touch is something that we're losing on most things. Yes. Yeah. If ever you want to see a really cool a vintage documentary on linen thread being made, I don't know which brand or company it is, but the documentary was by British Pathe, P-A-T-H-E. And if you Google British Pathe flax linen, so they call it flax, and you'll see it's about 10-15 minutes. I can't remember how long it is, but they go from the cultivating process, you know, the guy in the field getting the flax and cutting it down with a scythe and all that kind of thing, to how they sort it. I mean, they're still using machinery and equipment, but there's a lot more handwork going. And just the way these guys in the factories are gathering bundles with their hands, and the way they wave it around and then throw it onto the pile at different angles and that kind of thing, you can see the absolute familiarity with their work. They've done it 100,000 times over decades, and it's just so cool to see how they used to make this stuff. I mean, it's black and white. It looks to be post-war. I could be wrong about that. It could be pre-war. It's very old. But yeah, a really interesting documentary, British Pathe flax linen, and you'll find it. I've watched that a couple times. It's really cool. Yeah, Ireland used to have a massive industry for that. In fact, I think on this linen, you've got the, is it the Red Hand of Ulster? I really don't know much about Irish history or politics or anything like that. I'm pretty sure they don't have that one anymore. But yeah, it was, this thread would have been made in Ireland, I believe. I think Barbers eventually got sold to or bought out by Coates, which is a huge thread company here in the UK. And now Barbers, I don't think it's made in Ireland. It says made in the EU, so that could be anything from Romania to Czech Republic. Yeah, I just love sometimes just using something vintage in something new. I think is pretty cool. It's a bit like the lock on the trunk is new old stock. It's a vintage lock. I don't know what year or how vintage. It might be turbo vintage. I don't know. It might just be a little vintage. But something old on something new really appeals to me for some reason. And using vintage thread is just kind of cool. I think it's quite fun. I'm going through my right needle here just so that I can get started on the left, because the openings on the right for the thread made by the pricking iron is just a little easier to feel for on the right hand side. So I'm just opening it up very slightly for my left needle here, and then my left needle. Now it goes through. I can't remember if this is a mirror image or not, so it might just be really confusing to you. Some lives, I know Instagram is a mirror image. People often ask, "Oh, I didn't realize you were left-handed." I was like, "I'm not. This is my right hand." Coming to the very end here. And I'm stitching right to the very end here, which will be covered up by the gusset itself. So once we glue the gusset on, we'll be gluing over the ends of these pieces of thread. So I don't really need to do some heavy back stitching work. Just going to back stitch one. I'm not even going to bother to glue it, because the gusset will go over this and it will be glued over and also stitched over. So it really doesn't matter. So let's trim these threads. This is a 3mm stitch spacing, which is consistent with the handle. So let's move you guys back. Yeah, 3mm is what I've used on the handle, and also the trunk corners, which is a good size, I think, overall for toughness and also finesse. And notice I put a little strip of leather over this. So far, so good. I think I'm going to do it on this side as well, because these Dream Factories are absolutely terrible for catching thread. I just kind of skived the end of it down thin and then skived the corners and then glued it on with some contact adhesive. I did it just before this live, actually, so there's nothing to catch on all of it. So hopefully, I don't know why I did it on the top as well. Probably out of consistency. Wasn't thinking, don't need it because the thread goes up, doesn't it? Oh well. Okay, let's have a look. These threads, making sure they're all sitting pretty. Sometimes if for whatever reason a thread is just sitting a little bit out of where it should be. In this case, a reinforcement sometimes dictates where it goes. You can manipulate them just very slightly with a round awl and push them into place. And sometimes they just pop back into place. And you can look along and go, okay, I can see a straight stitch right there. That's difficult to see from above. Manipulate one side of the stitch down, the other side up. And that's gone back to normal. There's another one down here. This is likely the reinforcement has caused this. I'm sure this is not the most entertaining thing you've seen all day. Sorry about that. I want to make sure that this is looking nice and sitting pretty. And then once you've kind of manipulated the threads to sit at nice angles, you can then hammer them down, and that just makes it permanent. Getting a wax build up on the end of this hammer here. Okay, so very difficult to see. There's this very thin thread, very small stitches on the front side and the rear side. And these ends, I've actually skived them off, just a little 3mm skive, which is something you can do instead of roughening, where you're going to be gluing. You can actually just skive the surface away. On soft leathers, especially pigmented, roughing can be quite difficult sometimes. So you just skive it off, opens up the grain, allows glue to soak in. So now this part is going to be stuck down onto there. That gets bent in the center, pressed in, marked, prick marked, and then stitched in itself. And then that will happen on each end. And then it can be dropped inside the trunk and using contact adhesive or PVA glue or whatever you want to be using, probably contact. That can then be put in place. Then we can pin it. Okay, so there'll be little tiny brass pins on either side. You can see them there, 3 on this side and 3 on this side, mainly at the top, which is where most of the stress of the opening is going to be. Plus, if you put pins down there, you're just not going to get your hand inside that tiny little trunk with a hammer. So it's kind of pointless anyway. All right, guys, thank you very much for joining me. It's a very short live, 18 minutes, not too bad, you know. Just a little quickie, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, don't forget to comment below, and I'd really appreciate if you could give me a like on these videos. That really helps helps me in the YouTube algorithm. I was going to say helps the algorithm. It doesn't. Okay, thanks a lot, guys, and don't forget to turn on your notifications. And if you're looking to see how to hand stitch, if you're interested in learning the process, I have a free course on my website, leathercraftmasterclass.com, which I'll link below. And you can go and get that absolutely free. In the meantime, thank you very much, and I will see you in the next live. Take care.